In this lesson, we'll cover SQL management with DBArtisan XE. You'll be given an overview of SQL management, tips and tricks on using a visual query builder, a general overview of the iSQL window, an overview of SQL debugging, analysis, and tuning features in DBArtisan XE, and a SQL debugging example. DBArtisan XE provides powerful visual tools for creating and analyzing complex SQL statements and server-side code objects. We'll take a walk through the visual query builder, spend some time in the rich SQL editor, as well as take a look at some debugging examples and show you how you can use Oracle's profiler and some tuning features within DBArtisan XE. First, let's take a look at the visual query builder. In this example, I'll connect to my local SQL Server 2005 instance, navigate to the database all the way down to the table, and we can invoke the visual query builder in two manners. First, we can select a table, right-click, and select Build Query. Or with the table selected, we can go to our Tools menu, Query Builder. So here with it selected, it brings back the table that we had highlighted. If we had multiple tables highlighted, we bring all the tables in. Let's go up here and select the client table. We're going to join the two. And as I drag and drop it onto the palette, you'll see that it is linked via a foreign key. DBArtisan was able to read the metadata and determine that there was a foreign key that existed between the two tables. And now let's go ahead and grab the client transaction table and drop that in. And you'll see it creates a lot of foreign key constraints here. And that's just simply reading the metadata and looking at foreign keys in the data dictionary. But within the query builder, we're able to modify these. So I've highlighted one. I'm going to go ahead and remove that, press the delete, and I know from my understanding of the tables and the structures, the broker is joined to the client via the broker ID, and then the client is joined to the client transaction table via the client ID. So we're going to go ahead and remove this other link to the broker ID. Now, from here we can start selecting tables, and a little bit overview of the query builder. In the bottom section is our preview pane, so you'll see nothing's there, and the reason why there is nothing there, even though we see three tables in our palette, is because there are no rows selected, no columns selected. So let's go ahead and we'll take the broker last name, the broker first name. Now we start seeing our preview pane. We'll get the client first and last name. We'll also get the client city in a client state, and then we'll get, for the transaction, let's look at price and number of units is all we'll need here. So if we go down to the bottom, expand that, we'll see our preview pane. So here's the actual query that we've generated using the visual query builder. But we're also able to add some more constraints in. If, for instance, it's important for us that we only bring back those records, for instance, in a state that is in California. So let's go ahead and right click in the AND. We're over here in the DML tab now, Tables and Views, or DML. Right click on AND and we'll add a new one. We'll drop this down. We'll go and select the client state, and we want that to equal, let's put this in quotes, and we'll equal CA. So here we'll press OK, and again we'll go down, scroll down in our preview pane, and we'll see that the additional where clause, the client state province, equals CA. So here we were able to generate the foreign keys using the query builder, as well as manually add criteria by right clicking the AND clause. We can also add group by statements if we'd like, depending on however we'd like the query to be constructed. We're also able to go in here and within the joins highlight those with a left click, and then come back with right click, and we can change the color, we can delete as I did earlier, or we can look at the properties. So here we have the table, the from and the to table columns. We have the join type. So here we can change this from an inner join to a left outer or to a right outer, and we can change the select the relation operator. So by default it's an equal. So go ahead and cancel out of that. We're also able to at any time drag and drop things on the palette and check this out, and move things around and make it fit exactly how we'd like. We're also able to save this. So if I press File Save, you'll notice that this is suffix with the EQB, Embarcadero Query Builder, so we can save that off and bring that back in whenever we'd like and modify that. Down in the bottom, the preview pane is read only. If we try and make any change to that, I pressed a key on the keyboard, it prompts us with a message that says the Query Builder does not support direct editing. Would you like to open it in another SQL window? If I pressed OK here, it simply takes the query that I created and open it up into another iSQL window. And here I can modify it as I'd like, or maybe I can cut and paste it and drop it into a stored procedure, whatever I need to do with it. Let's go back to the Query Builder again. Take a look at a few more things here. We can execute it right from within the Query Builder, and we can finally check the syntax. Understand exactly what we like. If we want to remove a table or multiple tables, and we can select the delete selected objects. We can look at the auto layout. If at any time we'd like to select this, if we have multiple tables, we can select the auto layout, and it'll go ahead and drop it down in the layout. We can also look at the auto join. So if, for instance, and this is an option that we covered in the first section when we covered an overview of DBArtisan, as well as taking a look at the options editor, and we can turn auto join on and off. So if by default it is set to off, in my situation it's set to on, but if it was set to off and we'd like to go ahead and auto join this, we can simply select that icon, and it will go out and read the metadata and come back with the joins. So using a visual query builder is very simple. It's really at its root is just a drag and drop utility, and lets you as a user go through and select the columns that you need, the where clause, and modify those accordingly. And then you can take the query and take the query builder session, save it off, bring it back in later at a later time to modify it, or at any time take the query that was generated, move it over to an iSQL window, and work from there. Now let's take a look at working in the iSQL window. And I'll do that by using that query that we just generated from the query builder, and we'll go ahead and take a look at what we can do to build on that. Before I do, I am going to show you how to open up a new query window. So from here, File, New, and we're going to look at a new iSQL window, Control N, or from the menu bar, simply select the new, and it's already defaulted to an iSQL window. So from here, a couple of things we'll notice. Using DBArtisan's grouping utility, so we can label the data source. I've labeled this as a production data source, so things are highlighted in red. So we'll know that the iSQL window is trimmed in red and the tab is red background. That lets me know that I'm in a data source that's been categorized as a production data source. So visually it tells me to be careful with this data source. I've got some live data. Up here is our data source selection, our data source drop down. So here I'm selected to the data source that I'm connected to. This would show at the top all of my connected data sources, so I can easily select and go back and forth between ones I'd like. This over here is the drop down of the databases. This is pertinent to Oracle, I'm sorry, to SQL Server and Sybase. Oracle and DB2 would not have this. So here I'm working in this. So this the GIM database. So I would not have to use a use command if I'm getting data from the GIM database, which I am in this situation. So let's go ahead and we'll start typing here just to show you some of the commands and some of the features within the iSQL window. So at this point we can activate the column lookup, the column drop down. Actually, it's not just columns anymore, it's an object drop down. So let's do a control space, and from here it drops down all the applicable objects that I can use here. So within the GIM database, I see some schemas that I can use if I want to narrow it down to a certain schema, or I can go down and actually select another database if I'd like. In this situation, I want to go with a DBO schema, so I can either start typing and it'll isolate it for me, or I can arrow down or use my mouse. So I'm going to do DBO, and then I can press the period, and it prompts me again. Now I'm going to look and select the actual object that I'd like. So here's the broker. So now I have that object. So I'm going to alias this as T1. And then I'm going to add a new column, a new table, I'm sorry, and another control shift. But you know what? I know what I'm looking for already. So DBO dot, and it brings it up. and we're going to do a client this time, T2, and then again DBO dot, then client transaction. Again, I'm just typing, and the utility is restricting my drop-down for me. Client transaction T3, and then we'll go where T1 dot, and then it prompts it up. I know it's broker ID equals T2 dot, and again we're going to look at the client T2 broker ID. That's the first one selected, and T2 dot client ID equals T3 dot client ID. So here is the by simply typing, I'm letting the application help me, assist me with my typing. So you see here how we can do the column lookup. At any time, if I do something here, and we can continue to work. I'm sorry, I forgot the and there. T2 dot client, and as I did earlier, let's say state equals CA, and we can do an order by, and if I drop this down without a preface, it will bring back all the columns from all three of the tables. So it does not know any selection criteria that I've made. I did not alias this, so at this point I can go ahead and order it by, and we'll order it by client ID. And the client ID here, as you can see, is coming from the T2 table. So we'll double click that, and we can see this query come to fruition. Now, another area that I want to talk about quick is in our tools menu, our code workbench facility. Here we have the auto replace tab, and these are auto replace entries that we ship with the product. So for instance, there is an SEL, which we'll replace with select star from, and these are just a few that we've sent with the product. COU is a select count from. BT replaces with the begin trans. So let me just show you how that works. If, for instance, I find myself doing a lot of select stars from or select count from, so here I can do SEL and press space, and it replaces with select star from. I can change that to COU, hit space, select count from. These are customizable. You can create as many as you'd like, and they're there for you to use them. I encourage you to go ahead and use them. So in this situation here, though, I want to talk about our edit menu. So here's what we can do within the iSQL window. So obviously a select star, a select all, Control A, which is a common Windows interface. We can insert a file. So if you have a separate file that you want to insert within the body of this iSQL window, in the body of this SQL, we can do an edit insert file, and it'll bring the contents of that file and drop it in at the location that you specified. We can paste SQL syntax, so let's take a look at that facility really quick. And what that does is it walks us through some SQL commands. So if, for instance, we're wanting to do an average, so we can paste that in, and it gives us a little template to work with based on the actual command from the database. We can also select paste SQL statement. In this situation, it's similar to the graphical query builder in a way, but a little bit different. And we can look at this, and we're actually building a select statement, and we can paste the statement. We can modify it to be an update, insert, or delete. Let's keep the select statement, and then it'll just drop us in a really quick, high-level SQL statement. We can also, I'll go ahead and highlight a couple of rows here. We can edit. We can comment out. So highlighting a line can comment that out. We can go ahead and uncomment that. We can change things to lower and uppercase. We can match a token. We can indent and outdent. And we can record activities and play them back. Well, obviously we have find and the replace and go to. We have the concept of bookmarks within our editor. So if you're working in a very large file, you can place bookmarks within the file. So we can have a bookmark at line 10, a bookmark at line 100, and maybe a bookmark at line 500, and we can toggle between those bookmarks. As I scroll down, we can change this to read only, and then we can go to the code assist, which is the control space drop down that I showed earlier. So these are some things within the iSQL window. Also, within our iSQL window, we have the ability to highlight and only execute the selected criteria. So in this situation, I'm going to go ahead and make another where clause. I know this will restrict us a little bit, so I'm just going to highlight that, and I did that with my keyboard versus my mouse, highlighting that, and I'll press execute. and it brings me back the list, the rows returned. Now I could also continue to select that down and get the next where clause, press OK, and now we have no rows returned because there's nobody from the state of California that meets the criteria. I'm also able to schedule this query, so I can save it off, then I can schedule it to run at a later time using Windows Task Scheduler. I can go ahead and do in SQL Server, I can do it in Sybase, do a begin tran and then end tran. I can debug this. We also have the concept of pre-processing. So we do support the pound include and the pound define statements, so you can add those options in within your iSQL code. And so if you have a pound include and a file name, when you run that, we can pre-process that and bring the include file in, similar to the insert file option. We can also look here, we can do the script execution facility, and we'll talk a little bit about that when we cover the utilities section. Here we can look at the query plan. So let's go ahead and select that option. And when I run this, I execute. I'm sorry, let me go ahead and fix that. Now we'll run it again. And there we go. So now we're looking at a query plan of what actually is being executed by the database. So again, if I could get a little more real estate with a better resolution size, you'd be able to see all the information on one screen. But you get the understanding. It is an explain plan driven by SQL Server, and we're showing the results. You can see the nested loops, the joins, how you're actually going about returning the data, how the database is processing this. So we can toggle this off. We can look at query options. So we can show the plan, we can no count. There's quite a few set commands that we can do here. And this is also, you also have the ability then to save these specific options off. Save them off to a file, and the file is going to be an XML file. And then what we can do then is load those back up. So if we have a set specific options that we want to use for our queries, the first thing we'll need to do is we can go back to our options, and that was covered in the earlier section, but we can specify the options to every time we open up an iSQL window. We can load a default options, or we can load them up at runtime. When we're ready to run the query, if we have a specific set of options that we want to choose, we can save that off and load it up at runtime. So some options there within the query window. Here we have our format. So if I select that, it will format the SQL for me. It will indent, and this is all based on the options. We can go ahead and check the syntax, which is simply a syntax checker, and we can look at errors, any errors that were driven by the query. So here I want to go back into the file options really quick and just show you one of the new features that we have. So let's go into the iSQL window, and this is really where we live a lot when we're working with the iSQL window. The auto format option is when you select that, this is where we can define how we'd like to do that, and we can edit that to specify how we want things indented, where the right margin was, begin and end block, those kinds of issues. Cancel out. Code assist, we can enable code complete, which is exactly what I did. I unchecked auto activation, which meant that I had to hit the control space in order for that to work. Now, this was unchecked, and I'm going to go ahead and check that. Enable real-time syntax checking. So let's go ahead and OK that. So what that does is, on the fly, it finds out for me if I've got problems. So in this situation, I manually removed the O in order, obvious error. If I hover over this, it'll encountered unexpected token RDR. So if we see this anywhere in our code, right, it gives us a nice quick graphical a visual key that there's something wrong. So here's encountered a token T2, so it tells us we need to start looking here, and we can see that I did remove the word and. So when we have no more issues on the left side, we're ready to run. We know that our code assist, the validation has gone through the SQL and has validated the SQL. This is a general overview of the iSQL window. It's really rich with a lot of functionality, a lot of power within the iSQL window. I know I spend a lot of my time there. I think it's one of the top SQL editors in the market today. So now let's take a look at SQL debugging, and for that we'll hop over to Sybase. We'll open up our Explorer, navigate to our Sybase node. We'll connect, we'll go to our databases, and I'll still use the same. I have a test database that I have configured on all my instances. So we'll look at our DBO user, and for this case we'll look at the procedure, and we have a procedure in called broker client breakdown. I will right click on this, and you can see that we have an option for debug, and our debugger is supported against SQL Server, Oracle, Sybase, and DB2. And what I wanted to show, though, for Sybase, we worked directly with Sybase to create this debugger, and I just want to highlight one of the nice things if you're working with Sybase and you're working with temp tables, what we're able to do within the debugger. So if you have any input parameters, it will prompt you for this. If you have a lot of input parameters, you can save the parameter file, and that way when it comes time to run it again, to step through another debug session, you can just simply load that and it'll bring back all your values. So here we're ready to go ahead, and let's press continue. We start up our debugger interface, and here we go. We're working actually within the stored procedure now within the debugger. So here are all of our values. This is our broker ID, which is what we brought in. I have a walls test, one of my test variables. So we look at the watch. Have I brought any into the watch? I have, the broker ID. I look at our call stack, and I look at our dependency tree. So here I would like to take a look and see the client full name. I'm going to select that. I simply highlight that, and I'm going to drag it down and add that to the watch. So that's as easy as it gets when we want to add something to the watch window. So now let's go back. We'll arrow in, and here are our buttons up here we can step into, step over. So if a stored procedure is calling another stored procedure and we're confident with the functionality going on with it within the call stored procedure, we can step over it. What it'll do is it'll run the stored procedure, then step right back over and pick it up. We can step out. So if we're in a stored procedure and we want to get out quick and get back to that calling stored procedure, we can hop out. We can insert or remove a breakpoint. We can run it. It will execute the go command, which will run the procedure to completion. We can stop it at any time, and we can restart the debugger. And here is a profiler. So if you toggle this on, we'll start seeing time metrics in the left hand side, and these are metrics capturing the time metrics given when we're issuing the call to the database and the time it takes to get that call back. So let's toggle that off for now. Let's start stepping through the stored procedure. So here, as we step through, for any variables that we have, and once we start assigning this, we'll start seeing them. So overall average price now is $51.78 as we step through. And that's a good one there. Let me go ahead and highlight that, and we'll add that one to the watch as well. So as you can see in my watch window, my full name is still null because I haven't set that yet, and that'll be set here shortly. So here we're going to go with the client full name. If at any time I'm interested in that, I can just hover over a variable, and the value will pop up for me. So I'll keep stepping through this, and I'm going to declare a cursor. As I step through, you can see some of the other variables starting to get populated. And at this point, I'm going to start stepping through and actually inserting records into a temporary table to be read at a later date. So now, if I would like, I can step over to my temp table tab, drop this down, and get a listing of all the temporary tables being used. In this example, it's only the temp client. Drop that down, and it executes and brings back the data in the temporary table. So there was only one record returned there, but as I step through this, I'm able to see at the application, and I can run this by pressing the execute button. I now have two. Now you'll see that I've got a little processing here that less than the overall and less than the client average, mutual fund, and the price. But if I'm interested in triggering these other sections of code, right, if the price in is greater than or equal to the average client price, my options are pretty limited if I don't have a utility like the debugger, and that would be to go ahead and modify the data. But in this situation, I can go ahead and change this on the fly. I'll go to my watch window. The overall average price now, I'm going to change that and make that equal to, let's make it equal to $10, right? A drastic change, but it will now trigger some different processing now. So as I step through, you'll see that we've hit this. Now we're actually inserting into it's greater than. So the client is greater than the overall and the client average. So as I step through now and go back to the temp tables, I can highlight that. And I have that it's greater than the overall average price and the client average. So this is a really quick way to step through. Now I do want to show one more thing, and that is if we'd like to add a breakpoint, we can simply right click, and I should highlight this and not just glaze over, but here we have a lot of those same commands that were up on the menu bar. Step into, step over, run to cursor, a breakpoint, enable, disable breakpoints, and we can edit these breakpoints. So if at any time, this is a non-conditional one. By default, when you add a breakpoint, it's going to stop here no matter what. But if we want to do a conditional expression, we can certainly add that. If we're only interested in when the price maybe equals $50, only stop there. If the price is greater than $50, only stop here. And we can add that in as a conditional breakpoint. We can also do a skip count, which means process this through and skip until you've hit so many times and then stop the break. So we'll cancel there, and that's my breakpoint. So if I highlight here, we can see where I am by the arrow key, by the arrow indicator. So continue to step through, and now I'm satisfied with my logic. I've run through the averages. So let's go ahead and just run this. And what it did was it ran until it hit the breakpoint. So if I go back and rerun this, we can see all the information now. The logic and the loop is finished. Now I'm at the finishing parts of my stored procedure. So as I step through, I've brought in the overall average price. I brought in this information. Now I'm going to drop the table. So here at this point, we actually have results for this stored procedure now. And you can see that via the results tab. So let's just finish up, and there we go. Now we're finished using the debugger, and we have the results of what the debugger session returned. So this is our the integrated debugger. Again, I was working with SQL Server. Sybase right now, working with SQL Server. Oracle DB2 is identical to this. We have all the same functionality with those facilities within those DBS platforms. Also, a really quick overview of what we do provide for Oracle as well. We do have a tie-in with the SQL profiler for Oracle, and it's the built-in profiler, and what we allow you to do is capture profiling sessions. So you can, and I'll bring this up, it's in our performance node, it's in the PL SQL code profiling. So here we can simply right click, start profiling, and from here we can step through using the application and executing stored procedures or packages. And as they are executed, Oracle, it's really a front end to the DBMS profiler, and we're capturing the profiling metrics. The database is doing all the work. We're just simply providing the user interface. So as we come back here, here's one I tested with yesterday. We have a run. Let's go ahead and open it up. We can look at the run summary, which is a graphical representation, and this is just one stored procedure. So let's look at the run detail, and here we go, and we can see that this one stored procedure took most of the time, and I can do a unit detail and break that down. If I had executed multiple stored procedures, I'd be able to see that as well. And then we can see that line 47, I had a call, and that's the total time it took. And we can see a really quick breakdown then of where our possible potential issues are. And this is all a graphical representation of the Oracle profiler. So here I can also select 10 here, press refresh, and we'll come back with the top 10 lines of code. And you can see it's a pretty straight drop off. So we can find those lines and actually navigate to those and really get down and find the issues. Here, if we had more than one stored procedure, we could drop this down and select the specific stored procedure we would like. Again, multiple runs. So if we find issues with commands, maybe what's needed is an index, we can add the index, run the same Profiling session again, capture the same metrics, and then we can toggle between runs and see the comparison, see the differences between the two. So a nice graphical front-end tool. Again, another facility within DBArtisan that you can use to manage your SQL code and help you optimize the SQL that you're producing and placing on the database. Again, just a high-level overview of some of the functionality within DBArtisan XE to be used when managing your SQL environment.